Her triumphs. I took a group of women that didn't believe in themselves, and I just believed in them. Her trials.
I never wanted to go to practice. I was losing a ton of weight.
Her story.
I just put my faith in God and just trusted the system.
Her why.
I want people to see what I did and say, oh, that's so awesome. I'm going to be better than that. That would be how I hope that this journey ends.
This is Her Why, where we tell the stories from BYU women's sports. Here is your host, Lauren McLean.
This interview features BYU sprinter Sami Oblad, who originally broke the indoor 400 record in 2024. Since recording this conversation, Sami has shattered that record once again, clocking a lifetime best of 51.71 seconds in New Mexico, improving her previous time by over a second. We hope you enjoy this episode.
We're so excited to have you here with us on Her Why, where we celebrate the amazing women who make BYU sports great. Joining me today is Sami Oblad, a record-breaking BYU track and field star who has made her mark as part of BYU's championship-winning teams. Sami, thank you so much for being here with me today.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
Looking back at your athletic journey from starting track just to stay in shape for volleyball, which is a crazy thing, to becoming a BYU record holder and national champion in track and field, how does it feel to see how far you've come?
This is an interesting question because I love volleyball. That's like my hobby outside of my active hobby outside of track, and that my dream was I'm going to be an Olympic volleyball player, right? Wow. But I am not that tall, and I didn't want to be a libero, so switching over to track was a hard decision for me, and then resulted in when volleyball season ends, I'm sick of it. I'm ready for a break. When track season ends, I'm so sad and I want more. So that was how I decided to do track. And then I had an interesting conversation with my boyfriend recently because he said, how do you feel like you're doing so much better than you were when you got here as a runner? And I told him, this sounds so cocky, but I was like, I always knew I was going to get here. He was like, well, how did you know that? I was like, I don't know. Why would I keep going if I wasn't going to get here?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just an interesting view.
That's really cool. You were an all-state athlete in both volleyball and track. So you didn't want to be libero. So what position did you play in volleyball?
I was an outside, and then I could jump pretty high, so I was in middle. We didn't have very many options for middles. I think that was why.
You must have some hops, because how tall are you?
I'm like 5'5", 5'6", somewhere in there.
That's incredible. What was it like juggling those two sports in high school?
It was awesome because I had coaches that let me fully focus on one sport at a time. So it was volleyball season was only volleyball, and then when track came around, it was just track. So it was great. My parents were very supportive, came to my games, came to my meets. My siblings came, and it wasn't as hard to balance as I guess you would expect it to be.
Right. High school's kind of a different beast
than
if you were trying to do that at the collegiate level, right?
Oh, yeah.
Volleyball's a big team sport, but track has a mix of team, which and individual events. How is that transition? Like take me through the difference between those two things.
Yeah. The funny thing with volleyball, I remember getting frustrated with my teammates. I loved them, right? We were best friends. Everybody's loves each other, but you're with each other a lot. I remember getting pretty frustrated of, okay, yeah, that mistake affects all of us. Like, step it up. Come on. Yeah. But in track, if it's a mistake, it's, wow, I screwed up. This is on me. The only reason I ran that time is because of me. So there's a lot more accountability there. At least it's also different from the high school to college level. That I'm sure it'd be different on a collegiate volleyball team. But that was something that I noticed is the level of accountability between track and volleyball is a little different.
So do you kind of like that it's on you?
I love it.
Like that difference, like you're not relying on your teammates as much, but like, no, this is on me.
I do really like it. And I love that most of the athletes feel that way of I'm responsible for my race and my training, and the outcome it's purely based on what I'm doing and how much effort I'm putting in. But then putting that together on a relay team and you have 4 women doing that, then it is a team sport suddenly. And it's, wow, we're at this high level of accountability. And the performance it's unreal. So I love that.
Do you prefer racing on your own, or do you like running in relays with your teammates?
I really enjoy both. I think my answer might differ if one was first. So usually the 400 open, where I'm by myself, is the first event. And that was awesome. It's great. But then you're kind of tired for the relay. It's like, oh, I already raced today. I want to go eat lunch. But maybe if they were flipped, I'd prefer the 4x4. I love both, though. I would say they're neck and neck. They're pretty close.
So do you feel the same kind of teamwork in track as you did in volleyball? Because I just think that's such an interesting thing with track. Like we mentioned, volleyball, you're relying on everybody doing their job. Track, it's a little different. So do you feel that same camaraderie with your teammates like you do in volleyball?
I think so. I would say that I feel a similar camaraderie that you mentioned. It is a little different, though. The frustrations that I would feel in volleyball, I don't really feel those as much here. And I do think that is a big part due to it being a higher level of the sport. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a friendship between you're all working hard, you're sweating, you're throwing up, you're crying in workouts, but so are your teammates. Yeah. And it's we're doing this together and it sucks. And it's great. You build great relationships that way.
That's really cool. Not the throwing up. That's not very cool.
It's a little gross, yeah.
I can only imagine when I'm running a 400 as fast as you are. So you mentioned it a little bit, but when did you feel like track became your main sport?
Let's see. I started track to be a high jumper because they said, "Oh, you jump high in volleyball. Come to track today." And then it was little events at a time. Was, "Hey, run the 100," and "Oh, you won the 100." "Hey, run the 200." Oh, and I wasn't an incredible high school athlete. I was pretty average for a Utah track runner. Yeah. But I think the joy that I started to feel in working out and in racing started to feel better than volleyball did. Kind of like I said earlier, I'd get to the end of a volleyball season and it was, wow, I need a break from these people. I need a break from the sport. I don't want to be on a volleyball court for another 6 months. Where the track was, okay, well, now the season's over. I'm going to go to the track because I like being there. I like being with my friends there and the workouts that we would do. So that was a big part of it.
Who was it that initially was like, hey, you could be really good at this? Like, you need to start doing track.
This is my freshman year in high school. There was an outside hitter, and I was like her little, they had this like buddy system of one senior takes a younger girl if you're the same position. So she was this outside hitter that I just admired so much. She was awesome. And she ran something in track. I don't know if she did the 100 or what it was, but she was kind of my big sister in that team culture, I guess. So she told me, "Oh, you should be a high jumper. Come with us." And so I went out with her and it was, "Oh, I really like this." And then it just went from there.
So cool. It takes kind of that one person to believe in you, right? Yeah. Like, hey, I think you can do this. And you're like, oh, I can. Yeah. I can do this. You were recruited for both D1 volleyball and track, which is pretty cool and rare. Yeah. You also had a season-ending knee injury during the recruiting process that stopped you from doing both sports, right? So what was it like having to go on recruiting trips with a knee brace and with crutches?
It kind of sucked, actually. I actually had a few coaches tell me, we're not going to pay for your official visit anymore because we can't count on how you're going to come back from this injury. We're so sorry. That's the end of us recruiting you here. If you want to try to walk on when you're better, you can. And that was pretty frustrating. I was like, are you kidding? Like, I can get back from this. That was very motivating for me. I also had colleges that they didn't mind at all. It was, oh, we know that you can totally come back from that. You're going to be great. And yeah, it was really important to see how the coaches were treating it, on the faith they had in me being able to come back from that and still being able to compete at a certain level. Yeah. So I really liked that. And there were coaches as well that were very real with me of, this sucks. You're probably not going to be any good for a few years. Yeah. But we still want you to train with us and see what you can do. And that was eye-opening because I thought, oh, I'll come back in a year and I'm going to be right where I finished. I'm going to be on top of it. And that was not the case at all. I had a few years of trying to get back to where I was.
That probably made your decision easier, seeing the coaches that were like, oh, yeah, we don't, you know what I mean? Like, it was probably easy for you to narrow it down. So what made BYU's track program stand out to you compared to the others?
This is kind of an interesting take. I did not want to come to BYU.
Really?
At all. And it really didn't feel like an option for me. So I had been recruited by a few other schools in-state and out-of-state that I was pretty excited to visit and to go to. And I talked to the coach at BYU and told him, I'm not that interested. And then I had an extra official visit that he reached out to me and we did that visit. My parents came with me. after the visit, it was, wow, the coach is awesome. This isn't for you. And that's how I felt too. I was like, yeah, this isn't my place. I don't.
So your parents thought that too. They said, this isn't for you.
Yeah. And it was, I totally felt that way of, I don't fit with the team. I don't fit with, the coach is really nice, but this isn't really a program for me. And so like I mentioned, I have a little brother. He's not so little anymore. He's 2 years younger than me, but we've always been pretty close. And in high school, I was a grade, 2 grades above him, so we did most of our stuff together. And he was also an incredible track athlete. He's a distance runner, though, and he was awesome. And he, while I was picking schools, didn't know that I was having this dilemma of, where am I going to go? What do I do? And I didn't want to talk to him about it because it made him sad that I was leaving, and it made me sad. So it was like, we won't talk about that. But I told the coach at BYU that, nope, I'm done. I've found another place, another 2 that I'm deciding between. And while I was trying to decide, I kept thinking, I would pray about it, and I would talk to my parents about it. And it was, every time I'd bring it up, it was BYU would come to my mind. And I was like, that's not even an option. So I'd change the topic. We'd do something else. And I remember the morning, well, I think this was the day before signing day, I had printed out a whole bunch of the letter of intent from a whole bunch of schools. And I was like, okay, this is my stack that I'm going to pick between. And I had told my parents, like, it's going to be one of these 2. And it was 2 different schools that weren't BYU. And that night that morning, I had said a prayer of, what am I going to do? Like, I want this school. This is what I'm deciding. And then BYU comes to my mind. I was like, okay, amen. That's it. I'm done. I'm not praying about this anymore. And I go upstairs. My room is in the basement. So I go upstairs to my family eating breakfast. And my little brother comes down, and he's not a BYU fan. He wasn't at the time anyway.
Yeah.
And he says, Sammy, have you thought about BYU? Have you seriously thought about BYU? Wow. And I was like, oh, yes, I have. So he said that, and then my dad said something else about that. And those are the 2 men, right, that I really value their opinions. I'm going to cry about this. But having that confirmation of this is something I was feeling, and then having them say I need to consider that. So I called the coach. Coach, do you still have a spot for me? And he goes, what? Really? I was like, yeah, I'd like to come to BYU if you'd let me. And he said, well, you missed the application deadline. Like, we can't get you in if you're not a student. And I was like, oh, well, I don't think my grades are going to get me there. I don't know. And then a few days later, I get an email, hey, congrats, you're into BYU. Here's your acceptance letter. Fill out this essay when you have time.
Wow.
And it all just worked out perfectly. The coach was great. He got me a room in Heritage, and I had teammates that I was living with, and it was all very last minute, but worked out better than you could have planned it to work out.
Wow. So he pulled some strings for you.
Oh, he pulled so many strings. And he was
That's
incredible.
amazing.
Yeah.
So your parents came around to it, because I think that's interesting that they too were like, oh, this isn't the place for you.
Yeah. And I think parents play such a big role in receiving revelation for their children. And I think they had also, like I mentioned, my dad had said, I've been thinking, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
And it was, yeah, that's what I'm feeling too.
Yeah.
So I think they were sad that I was leaving anyway, but very excited that it was going to be closer to home than the other options were. So
what were the other options, can I ask?
The one that I was really liking was actually Utah State. And the program's a little different there than BYU. But visiting there, I remember walking on the campus and being like, oh, this is home. This is where I belong. And hanging out with the team and the coaches. And I verbally committed there to that coach of, this is where I'm going to go. This is where I want to be. And he told me, actually, he said, oh, well, some of your class that I've been recruiting, they all went to BYU. They've already signed. So if you sign anywhere else, don't make it BYU. Oh. I cried on the phone with him. I feel like I was breaking up with somebody. I was like, I'm so sorry. I can't, this isn't going to work. And truly felt like I was breaking up with that coach. But
BYU's that one guy that always gets in the way, right?
Yeah.
Was there a moment in your track career up to this point where you knew, like, I made the right choice?
Yes, and it actually took a few years. I have quite a few in-between things that happened before I got to that point. My freshman year, I was coming off of that knee injury that I had my senior year. And then coming in, I ended up not being able to handle the training very well. My body was just not used to it. And I had to have another knee surgery that winter break of my freshman year. So that bummed me out. I was, okay, I can't have a season. I have to have another knee surgery. And on top of that, I'd been wanting to serve a mission. And that had been on my mind. And I prayed about that. And it was this very clear capital letters, N-O, no. And that was all I got. And I was like, what? How can you be telling me no? And I had prayed about it earlier because before I wanted to pick a college, it was, I'll go on a mission, then I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
And that was also a no.
Yeah.
And in college, praying about it, getting the no was pretty frustrating to me. And I had these roommates. I had awesome roommates. They were so fun and so kind. We didn't know each other before. It ended up being just awesome girls. But almost all of them were starting their mission papers together. And I remember standing, if you've seen the Heritage dorms, pretty small little kitchen, right? They're sitting at the dining table and I was leaning on the door watching them do their mission papers. And I was like, wow, I wish I could do that. And I said something about it, like, wow, how cool you guys are all going to go together. And one of them, she looks at me, she says, Sammy, why don't you start your papers? And I was like, you're right. I'm going to do that, even though I got a no. So I actually called my bishop that night. And that Sunday, I opened my papers and I started working on them. And eventually got my call. I went, and I remember thinking out there, I'm sticking it to God. Like, look what I'm doing. My rebellion is serving this mission that he didn't want me to serve. And I just got this clear confirmation of, oh no, like this is where you're supposed to be. And it was good for me to hear that, but also good to see that I put myself here. Mm-hmm. And it helped me own that experience of I put myself here. It's hard. It's frustrating. I miss home. But it's also, it's good. It's fun. I'm learning. I'm growing. And I did put myself here. And I didn't have to be here. And there wasn't this set plan for me to go, but it worked out. And the confirmation from the Lord that I received that, yeah, this is where you should be was a good example to me of, I have a lot of agency. I get to kind of make my own path. And that helped me a lot coming back as well, because I had another knee injury getting home. I had some stress fractures. Coming back from mission is hard. Your body's not really in shape to do any sort of sport. I started with swimming because I couldn't run. Oh my gosh. And eventually got back to running, had some injuries, had some coaching changes and things that were hard. And after maybe a year and a half, 2 years after getting back, I kind of received that same thing of like, this is where you're supposed to be. And it was, I had a new coach. I was training differently and traveling differently. And it just was this reassuring thing of, wow, all of that hard stuff was totally worth it. And it's still hard. And it's still showing me a good side of it too. So
that's amazing. Things you might not have otherwise learned.
Yeah.
Had you taken a different path. I think that's incredible. Well, it all worked out for you,
yeah,
right? You set BYU records in the indoor and outdoor 400 meters in the same year. Had you been chasing after those records for a while? Was that a goal for you?
I think yes, it had been a goal, but at the time, the season before last year, I was not running crazy times. I wasn't even on the top 10 board. That's the crazy part. Our top 10 record board, I wasn't really even close to getting on there. And I talked to my coach after that season, and I was like, I love track, but I'm not putting up numbers. I don't know that I fit here. And we talked about changing events. We were going to switch to the 800. So he started training me as an 800 runner. And that meant that instead of my summer being a break, I had some mileage. I had some stuff I was doing all week, a few days a week to train for the next season. And then getting back, my body looked different. I felt different. And suddenly I was putting up these times that were like, oh, you like to train like an 800 runner, which sucks. I'd rather train like a 200 runner, you know? That'd be a little easier. But I was able to run a few different races, and the 800 really kind of sucked and I didn't enjoy it like I did the 4. And my coach had incredible faith in me that I was going to be able to put up the times that I've been able to do. The funny thing was that when I ran that first time of whatever the school record was at the time, I went to him like, look at this, I did this. And he was like, well, yeah, like, of course you did that. Like, he just has he's very calm, very collected, but the expectations that he has, they're within reach, even though they don't seem that way. And so when that happened, it was like, oh, you knew this. Like, I did trust you. That's why I got here. But now I really trust you because you have shown that you trust me to do what I did, kind of thing. And that was a big deal to me. I don't remember what I was answering, but
no, and I love that. And I want to know, that's interesting because I was going to ask you after all that hard work, those injuries, everything you've been through, thinking like, oh, am I even good enough to be here? Right?
Yeah.
Then you break the school records. What was going through your mind when you saw those numbers and you're like, I did it?
I did not know that was the school record. I knew what the bottom few times were on the top 10 board. And then by then I hadn't, that last year, that season, I didn't run an open 400 until conference. Because like I said, we were training for the 8, so I had run it in relays. So we were looking at my relay splits going, okay, yeah, those are pretty sweet splits. We'll put you in an open 4. And then running it was like, oh, I have been doing that. Like that's a real time. It's going on my TFR website, my account. That's legit. Like that's a cool time. And obviously that time is not the most competitive in NCAA, but it was a big deal. It was a big deal for BYU to have that time come up. But I was pretty excited about it. And this weird feeling of like, yeah, I should have done that. Like, of course I did that. I've been working so hard that should have been a result that I expected, which is kind of sounds weird. Kind of sounds like I was putting myself down a little bit, but it was very motivating to go, wow, I can keep doing that too.
So cool. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Sami talks about her relay success at BYU and her family roots. This is Her Why. Hey, Cougar fans, this is Lauren McLean. We have some amazing shows here at BYU Radio, including the Big Stories podcast, where host Cleon Walsh shares real-life stories from the Big 12 and beyond. Last season, Cleon brought you stories about walk-on TCU point guard Darius Ford, who went from homeless to college hoopster. And Kansas play-by-play announcer Brian Haney shared how he organized a basketball tournament to raise money for kids with cancer. This season, the podcast traveled to Tucson, Waco, Houston, Orlando, and other cities to bring you more amazing and inspiring tales. So check out Big Stories wherever you find podcasts or on the BYU Radio app. Welcome back to Her Why. I'm Lauren McLean, continuing my conversation with BYU track and field record breaker Sami Oblad. So you've set records in both indoor and outdoor events. What's the biggest difference between those two, indoor and outdoor?
Oh, yeah. The 400 is pretty different in indoor and outdoor. The indoor tracks are usually 200 meters. So that's half the distance of my race, half the distance of an outdoor track. So when I run outdoor, you have a lane. You stay in your lane the whole way around. You don't touch anybody. There's no contact, right?
Yeah.
Get out of the blocks, you run your race, and you finish in your lane. Indoor, it's a little more hands-on.
Really?
So you run the first lap in your lane until, you run most of the lap and then you cut in and you hope to beat somebody there, right? You hope to get in front so you're not bumping anybody. But if you aren't, you're elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, running with them or right behind them, and everybody's in lane 1. So people they're bumping you, they're elbowing you, kind of pushing you out. And that kind of sucks because it's hard to feel that way when it's a regular meet where it's, we're not trying to compete for a conference title or for a regional spot. We all just want to PR. Like, we shouldn't be that pushy, but it becomes a very aggressive event suddenly when you're in that second lap if it's a close field.
So I'm assuming you like outdoor better.
I love outdoor.
Yeah. That was the indoor sounds a little
it's a little
violent.
tough. It's funny though, because I've been performing better indoor. For some reason, there's something interesting about you run a first lap and you reset. Your brain goes, okay, we got one more lap and then we're done. Where in the full 400, it's still full 400, but the full lap, you get halfway and it's, oh, wow, I'm only halfway.
Yeah.
I've still got another half to go.
Yeah.
So it breaks it down a little bit better. I think it eases the mind a bit of, okay, I already did a lap. I can do another lap. That's easy.
Yeah. Well, you seem like a tough, competitive girl, too, so I'm sure you can handle the elbows that come your way. You've been a key part of BYU's success, including winning a national championship in the distance medley relay last year. How did you get involved in that specific race?
That's a funny one because it's the way that our school splits it up is we've got 3 of those legs in the relay are distance runner legs. So it's a 1,200, an 800, and a 1,600, and the 400's in there is the second leg, which the distance women could do all of it. They absolutely could run a fabulous 400. But they let us run the fastest 400 runner as that leg who has an open 400 time. Most of the distance women don't. But at the time I had a teammate that she had been running it in previous years. So that was kind of an interesting thing because it was, oh yes, you're my training partner, but I'm slightly beating you and I don't want to take that from you. And it's not really up to us to decide that. It's more up to the coaches to then say, oh, we want either somebody with experience or somebody running that time. And they invited me to go with them, and I was stoked. So I got to be part of them. The women that I ran with, incredible athletes. They all ran really well. I remember it being a bit hard for me, though, because I had been running 53s-ish, which is exciting for me. Those are good times for me. And when we get there to the meet, there was an interesting energy of, okay, I'm going to do what they tell me. I want to make this work the best I can. And I've never been on this relay before. This is before we ran one time before nationals.
Okay.
So we ran it really well there. And then at nationals, Diljit sat me down and was like, okay, this is our plan. You're going to run. You cannot come ahead of second place kind of thing, which is not how sprinters run, right? I'm giving it my all that whole time.
Yes.
And I was having this internal crisis of, why are you bringing me here if I can't run my race? Like that's not fair. And I did what they told me, and it worked out really well. We had this national championship, which is awesome, right? How exciting. And if you've ever watched any of those videos, you might see me standing there trying to hold back tears of, no, and everyone's congratulating us and excited. And I was like, I hated that. And it wasn't the girls I ran with. It wasn't the coaching. It wasn't any of that. It all went perfectly to plan, but it was not how I like to run.
So that was in the national championship as well, that you had to do that?
So that was, in the first one, we just ran it as fast as we could. We got it all done. Yeah. But in the national championship, it was, and I didn't know this about distance races because I don't participate in those.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, you don't want to be out in the front. You want to be right behind them so that when you have the energy left, you pass them. And then the championship times don't usually reflect the best that those athletes can do. It's strategy. I apparently don't like running with strategy because I was so fresh. I felt bad because we had our out of the sprint group that was there, I had Coach Kyle was there, and then our men's 4x4 team, and those are my training partners. And they were all bummed because they didn't run very well. They didn't have the race that they wanted, and they're bummed. And then I was more bummed, and I had a national championship under my belt. And so they're mad at me because I was like being a brat about I didn't get to run the way that I like to run. And it was just a very interesting thing that I probably didn't deal with it the way that I should have, but I feel a little more comfortable now being able to say, yes, I can run what they want me to run and not feel like it's taking something from me.
That's got to be super hard, though. I mean, the way that you've trained for so many years is like, be in front, be the first. And she's like, oh, no, you got to ease up a little bit.
Don't do that. Yeah, don't run how you run.
Yeah, that would be really, really interesting. Well, it was an incredible accomplishment for you guys. So hopefully you can celebrate it now.
Yeah. Yes. I finally got the trophy out of my closet, so I now can look at it and not feel like, oh.
Oh, my goodness, that's so funny. How has working with teammates like Sadie, Carly, and Riley shaped your experience at BYU?
I really only got to work with them for that relay.
Wow.
So they're awesome women. I actually came in with Sadie. We were freshmen together. And so it's fun to see her progress and see the progress of the women that we all came in together, started as freshmen. Yeah, top of Utah, but that's not much, you know. So being able to see her progress and do as awesome as she has, where she's running professionally now, which is really sweet. And Riley and Carly were also just incredible women that I don't get to train with them.
You gave them a high five, won a national championship, and you were out of there.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So cool. Let's talk about your roots a little bit. Your mom was from Argentina. Mm-hmm. You grew up only speaking Spanish until you were 5 years old. So your mom didn't, you were telling me before, your mom didn't even speak any English at all. Is that right?
Yeah, I think she spoke very minimal English. Whatever she did speak was very little. Until I was, maybe 4, maybe 5, somewhere around there.
And your dad served a mission in Colombia, so he went along with it. He's like, okay, we'll speak Spanish to our kids until you had to go to school. Yeah. You were probably too little. Do you remember having to learn English?
I don't remember learning English. I remember being in school, but I don't remember the transition. My mom has told me how hard it was for her. we know that learning language is a lot easier for children than it is as an adult, but it's been great. Now we speak English in my house. It's been English since that switch, with a few words thrown in there. A few things that are always going to be the Spanish combo. But
so you speak English with your mom as well?
Yes. Yeah.
That is so cool. So you mentioned that you served a mission, and it was in Oakland.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Did you speak Spanish there?
I did. I got called to speak Spanish, and I was called to the visitor center as well. So I got to do a little bit of both, which is great.
So cool. So since your mom grew up in Argentina, do you guys have any fun traditions or anything that she brought from Argentina that you guys still do?
Oh, yes. We have, I'm going to have to think about that one. We have a lot of things that, some of the things I didn't even realize weren't normal to other families until dating somebody and going to their family. Things like, oh, that's weird. Like, oh, we don't do that. Some things that aren't as big of traditions, but are things that came from my mom. She is an incredible cook. She's told me she learned to cook from my grandpa, my dad's dad, actually, which is an interesting thing. He taught her a lot about cooking, but she has shared that with us to where we had home-cooked meals and we ate dinner together most nights of my childhood. And that is huge to me. There are a lot of families that don't do that, but that was something that I didn't realize that was such a special thing until being in a college dorm where it's, I have to cook my own meal and then eat it by myself or invite my roommates, and it's a different feeling entirely. But there's also a warmth and a closeness that exists within a lot of Hispanic cultures that if you met my mom, you would feel that. You'd absolutely feel that, of just this comfortable, warm person that she brought that into our home, which is great.
I love that so much. So awesome. It is an incredible culture. I served a mission in Chile.
Oh, yeah.
So I fell in love with the people in that culture as well. I know there's a little rivalry.
Oh, yes.
So I just loved hearing your story about this, everything you've overcome to get to the point you're at now. When you look back, how do you feel like you've grown as a person and an athlete since being at BYU?
Some of the things that have helped me to grow is just being able to have an outlet. So track has been a good outlet for me to let out frustrations and things that I'm trying to work through. And it also has given me a really easy way to measure, not just success, but also measure, wow, I didn't screw that up as many times as I did last week or last year. And that's been a big deal. But it also has just given me an opportunity to say, I'm just putting my head down and I am getting through this. And being able to see that sometimes you can break a record after having a hard season, or maybe it's, wow, I came back from this knee surgery and now my knee only hurts sometimes. And that is just as big of a win. So seeing all of those little things that come from being willing to put my head down, and I'm not the loudest one. I am not the biggest personality, but I love working hard. So doing that has helped me a lot and proven to me that there are going to be a lot of hard things after track. Track is not going to be my whole world.
Right.
And it can't be that much longer. So knowing that I can kind of isolate those experiences and say, yep, that was track. But what I learned from there is also going to help me work through other things, knowing that there's a good and a bad in everything else too.
I love that. So what is next for you after?
That's a great question. I am not too sure.
To be determined?
Oh, yes. It is to be determined for sure. I have a cute dog that's at my house right now. I'm going to hopefully get a nice house with a backyard for her at some point.
I love it. So awesome. I'm here with BYU Track and Field, Sami Oblad, and record breaker. Thank you so much for taking the time with me, and good luck this season.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Annie Robinson and Sydney Simpson for producing this episode with senior producer Cleon Wall. Her Why is a production of BYU Radio.